Welcome back to this week's special edition of NCBA's Cattleman to Cattleman. This week, we're sitting down with the experts from Land O'Lakes Purina Feed. Let's get back to our discussion. Dr. Mahoney, we were just talking about the effects that nutrition has on animal health and performance. And, one thing that I've always been told is not to overlook my vitamin, mineral, and micro-ingredient supplements. What would you tell us about that?
Kevin, great question. In fact, I think if we're looking at optimizing performance and health and supporting proper immune function, a real focus has to be placed on mineral and vitamin programs. We were talking at one point in the past, a lot of people really looked at providing free choice minerals as part of an insurance program. I think as we've learned more, really if we want to ensure the performance and support immune function in these calves and the mature stock, we really need to have a solid vitamin mineral program in the herd.
That's helpful. Dr. Scott, it's about time on our operation to begin thinking about creep feed, but for folks back home that may not be in a creep feeding system, define what we mean by creep feed first of all.
Sure, Kevin. Well, what we're looking at with creep feed is a term that's used to provide supplemental nutrition for calf while it's still suckling. So it's before the calf is weaned. There are many different ways that you can get this done. Some people will bring their cows in, give them some supplement, and sort off the calves and feed them some feed. In many cases, that's a lot of labor. So most of the creep feed programs involve a bulk feeder, and then there'll be some panels to prevent the cows from getting in and eating the feed for the calves, which is called creep feed. Yeah. And so it's pretty common practice for smaller operations. In other words, if you have 20,000 cows, most people are not going to creep feed just because of the man hours and labor and distance you have to travel to get it done.
Why would you recommend that people consider creep feeding?
Yeah, probably one of the biggest reasons and positive benefits that we've seen with creep feeding, and oftentimes it's overlooked, is you get a more uniformity in the calf crop. Oftentimes there'll be stragglers that just are always looking, a little less than perfect. And what creep feed allows to occur is for those calves to look more like they're getting a better nutritional profile. You see what happens as mama continues through lactation and gets closer to weaning, her lactation curve changes, so she's producing less milk. At the same time, the calf is growing, so its nutrient requirements are increasing. Then if you look at what Dr. Dickerson talked about, the change in forage quality, well, it declines. So if there's less nutrients available in the forage, then mama also provides less milk. So we call that where that inflection is the hungry calf gap. So supplemental creep feed helps augment the diet to support better performance of the calf.
So I was going to ask you that. I mean, so when do you think is the most important time to be providing that creep feed for calves?
Well, there's no doubt the most important time is whenever there's a concern on forage resources. Oftentimes this occurs during a drought, and that's typically when a lot of cattlemen typically will look into providing some creep feed for the calves. Another important time is for first calf heifers and also even second calf cows. If you have the ability to have those females separated from the rest of the herd, if you can provide some creep feed for the calves, then you got a better chance of those calves having weaning weights that are similar to the mature cow herd. Another one that makes sense is when feed prices are cheap and cattle prices are high, because in that situation you can support the gain of the calf for a more optimal program, because we're looking at sparing forage and also providing some groceries for that calf. So efficiency is something that's important, not only when you talk about efficiency of a program, but you're looking at labor efficiency too, for getting the most out of the land. One program that we developed over the years is called AccuRation Creep. Down south, it's AccuRation Cattle Limiter, LW for a lightweight calf. And in that situation, we have our intake modifiers that Dr. Dickerson talked about, to where calves will eat less feed, but they're going to gain the same weight that they would on a regular creep program.
Wow.
So with that, again, we're looking at optimizing the resources on the ranch.
That's great. I want to turn to an associated topic, Dr. Cosby, and visit with you. Last couple of years, not last year, but roll back the clock, there were a number of us that had some experience with early weaning because of some weather issues. Would you define what early weaning is all about?
Early weaning, it can be kind of a subjective time frame. If, Kevin, we think of traditional weaning being in that 180 to 220 days of age, average calf age is a traditional. To me, early weaning would be 120 to 150 days of average calf age, although calves have been weaned as early as 60 days in some cases where the producers may be looking for some added reproductive benefits by weaning the calves that early.
Well, and when? I mean, give us a perspective of the situations that you would recommend early weaning for.
Sure. A lot of the times it's the same as when we may consider the creep feeding program that Dr. Scott mentioned, first calf heifers. Oftentimes we breed those heifers to calve a month before the mature cow herd, so it would only make sense that we go ahead and wean their calves a little earlier. Times when forage is short, if creep feeding is not an option, maybe we need to go ahead and consider just weaning those calves. And then the third reason may be in order to allow us to hit some seasonal marketing windows.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned marketing. I guess I never really thought about that. Why do you say that?
Well, of course, the calf prices follow some fairly typical seasonal trends. October, November, big fall calf runs, prices are typically lower then just because of the supply. Right before then, in September, has historically been a pretty strong peak in terms of 550-pound calf weights. And if we think about some calves that are born in late January through the first part of March, they're certainly old enough to go ahead and be weaned in August and target that seasonal high. And so that can help us, get some more dollars on that calf. But also it allows a longer period through some pretty good fall grazing to get that cow back in shape going into the winter, where it may save us on some cow supplementation cost as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you're thinking about these younger calves, should you plan on providing some kind of special extra attention, or what else do they require that a 7, 8-month-old calf wouldn't?
Sure. One of the first things that we talk to producers about if they're considering early weaning is talk to your local veterinarian and get a good solid herd health program, vaccination program on calves that are younger than what we've traditionally dealt with. The other thing from a nutritional standpoint is those calves are younger and lighter. They don't have a lot of volume to hold a lot of long stem hay or bulky feed ingredients, so we really need a nutrition package that's very nutrient dense. In other words, provide a lot of nutrition in a small volume. And so one product we offer that meets that need is called Impact Starter Complete, and it's a complete starter feed. It's very palatable and nutrient dense.
What other advantages have you seen from folks who have implemented some kind of a early weaning kind of a program?
Well, what we've seen with producers that we've worked with is actually what a lot of the data from some universities such as University of Illinois and Ohio State would have demonstrated in the 90s was that those calves that are weaned early, if the producer goes ahead and finishes those calves out with an appropriate nutritional program, they can reach very acceptable carcass weights. They're very feed efficient, and their carcass quality grades are better than their traditional weaned counterparts.
Really, by early weaning or creep feeding or both?
Actually both.
Really?
The biggest bang for the buck in terms of quality grade is by the early weaning. Creep feeding helps the quality grade as well over non-creep fed traditional weaned calves.